Good morning, everyone. It's the 16th of December, and I want to talk a little bit about the Apostle Paul's death. We don't have any specific historical account in the Bible of the actual day of the death of the Apostle Paul, but most historians agree that the Apostle Paul was probably not crucified, but he was killed with a sword. He was beheaded. And there was two ways of killing. The Romans used killing with a beheading. One was with an axe and one was with a sword. And most scholars believe that he was beheaded with a sword. Now, the Apostle Paul had appealed to Rome, and there's a scripture that says he probably would have been let go if he hadn't appealed, but it was all ordained of God. The Apostle Paul was a educated scholar who came up under Gamaliel, and he said he was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, and he had subscribed to all of the laws and the traditions of a Pharisee. The only thing that separated him out from the Sadducees was that, of course, that he believed in the resurrection, and that caused great dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The last 2 years he spent in a rented house in Rome, and he faced many allegations and false charges brought up by the Jews, and he appealed to Festus, and also he appealed to Caesar. And we see that he had an opportunity to give his testimony before them, and he was a Roman citizen, and eventually he suffered at the hands of the very country that he was a citizen of, just like probably many of us as citizens will suffer at the hands of the country that we are citizens of. I suffered at the hands of the state of Missouri that I was born in, by them terminating me from my job and going through 5 years of battle with the state that I was born in. Apostle Paul was hated because he was coming against the traditions of men, and he was proclaiming the gospel of Christ because of his conversion. And we see his conversion, I can't give it a couple different times in the book of Acts, and how that changed his life, and how it changed the course of his life, and it changed what he did on a daily basis. Apostle Paul was a very busy man. After he was converted, he was not only a tent maker, he worked with his hands, but he also, traveled to a lot of different parts of the world at that time. And he ministered to a lot of different churches, and he wrote a lot of different books in the Bible. We know that he wrote the book of Romans, He wrote the book of Galatians. He wrote the book of Ephesians. He wrote the book of Colossians, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, Philemon, and I believe he wrote the book of Hebrews. And 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Philemon and Philippians. I think he wrote 13 books, if I remember correctly. So he was very busy. He also suffered much at the hands of the Jews. He was stoned. He was beaten with rods. He was scourged. He was led over the wall in a basket. He was to try to get away from his persecutors. There were many of the Jews that actually took a vow to take his life. We see that in our studies in Acts. The Apostle Paul was not selective as to whom he called out for false doctrine. He called Peter out for his false doctrine when Peter was trying to get people to circumcise and go along with the Judaizers, circumcise the Gentiles and go along with the Judaizers. And Paul called him out for it. Paul said that circumcision availeth nothing. And today you'll be persecuted if you don't go along with the traditions of these modern day churches. If you don't go along with the doctrine of free will and Arminianism, you'll be called out for it. You'll be excommunicated from their and ostracized. They don't want to have anything to do with you when you tell the truth regarding God's sovereignty. And I personally could not sit under a pastor that taught the free will of man, and neither could the Apostle Paul. The first 2 chapters of Ephesians are very clear about the sovereignty of God and salvation in all things. The Apostle Paul says in the book of Ephesians that he works all things after the counsel of his own will. He said, by grace you are saved through faith, not of works, lest any man should boast. And there's a lot of boasting going on about when you let Jesus into your heart, and the day you accepted Jesus, and the day you surrendered all, and you turned your life over to Jesus and all that. We never hear Paul bragging about the fact that he let Jesus do anything. Jesus did it all in regards to Paul's conversion. He struck him down on the way to Damascus. So we have no account of his physical death. We have no actual account of actually when he died. We see the sorrow of his friends when he announced that he would not see them again. And so we know about the time frame of his death, but we don't know the exact time frame. In fact, a lot of people don't know it, but there's actually no actual recordings of any of the actual physical day of any of the martyrs of the disciples. Now, James is talked about being killed, okay? And we know that Peter, history shows us, and scholars agree, that Peter did, because Peter was not a Roman, didn't claim to be a Roman citizen, so he died a very horrible death of the cross, and historical accounts say he died upside down, so he wouldn't die in the same manner as Christ. But that's just my thoughts this morning on the Apostle Paul. Just wanted to talk a little bit general about him. He was a great man of God, used of God mightily, coming against the traditions of men. May the good Lord be with you today is my prayer. God bless.